All right, let's go to Venezuela, all right? Turning now to Venezuela, before Thanksgiving, wanted to make sure that this is on everybody's radar. The likelihood of things popping off with Venezuela are very high over the next week or 2 weeks because of some decisions that have to be made in the military, because of some deadlines that are being imposed by Secretary Rubio, and there are high-stakes negotiations that are all happening behind the scenes. There is a full-on propaganda campaign happening at the Fox News level and from the government about why invading Venezuela would be good, actually, for all of you. Here you get a little bit of a preview from the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, why invading Venezuela will bring costs down. Here's what he had to say.
The peace deals, we are seeing a peace dividend from that. And I think there's a very, very good chance that if something happens with Russia, Ukraine, if something happens down in Venezuela, that we could really see oil prices go down even more. And oil and gasoline prices are down substantially under President Trump. And that is really the key to affordability, is lower energy.
Right, so it'll bring down fuel prices. We'll invade the country. Hopefully it will all go well. Then we'll take the oil. Now, here's the thing. That would all make sense if Maduro didn't also say, you can have all the oil. He said, you can have any oil that you guys want. And it's amazing how they're really relying on everybody to ignore the fact that from the beginning of these negotiations, Maduro has been willing and able to sell whatever oil to the United States that he has. He said, you can have all of it if you want to. Just don't bug me too much. Let me resign-ish. I'll leave in a few years, but with dignity. Why is that not enough? Oh, because it's not about the oil. It's a completely ideological war pushed by the contingent of South Florida, from which, unfortunately, our Secretary of State happens to come from. And just to give you a little taste of what that looks like, here's one of their congresswomen on Fox News talking all about this and setting, again, the groundwork for a potential invasion. Take a listen.
I mean, I would love to see a change in government. My wife's from Nicaragua. We know how terribly the dictators there rely on Venezuelan oil. But at the same time, a lot of Americans don't want actual U.S. participation in regime change in Venezuela. They would much prefer the Venezuelans to do it on their own. Do you think the pressure that Maduro has received will force him to leave on his own?
Oh, I think Maduro is not Fidel Castro. Maduro is not a brave boy. So now that he has understood that he's on that very nefarious list of the terrorist organization, that the airspace above Venezuela has been closed off and the commercial airlines from the United States are not flying, he's understanding that we're about to go in. He understands that he has been our enemy for the last 25 years. Venezuela, for those Americans who do not understand why we need to go in, basically for three reasons. You're in Fox business. Venezuela, for the American oil companies, will be a field day because it will be more than $1 trillion in economic activity. American companies can go in and fix all the oil pipe, the whole oil rigs, and everything that has to do with the Venezuelan petroleum companies, or everything that has to do with oil and the derivatives.
So everything that has to do, it'll be a field day for American companies. I mean, has anyone, the one thing I appreciate is opposed to Iraq is at least this time they just say it. They're like, yeah, it's about the oil. It'll be good for
But
right?
but the crazy thing is, it's not even really true.
Yeah, no, it's not true
to your
at all.
point,
Right.
I mean, it's almost like the aspirational thing is for it to be about the oil, but it really is this Cold War holdover mentality. They've tried every argument they could think of to get Americans somewhat on board with this in a very sloppy and haphazard and frankly insulting way. We're not going to buy into we're spreading democracy and so we have to do it. People are like, yeah, sorry, they can, no, we're not doing this again. We've learned those lessons. So then they're like, oh, but the fentanyl and the gangs and they're terrorizing us and that's why we have to do it. And then even seemingly the president realized that this was such total and complete bullshit that was not landing either. So now they're like, oh, okay, affordability was big in 2025. We saw Zoran, Mikey Sherrill, all these people got elected talking about affordability. That's what it is. It's the oil. It's going to bring down our energy prices. That's what we're going for here. But to your point, Like, I mean, first of all, that's a disgusting reason to invade a country. Number one, disgusting, immoral. Any other era of politics, they would have denied tooth and nail that that was what was behind their motivations and wrapped themselves in some sort of like, you know, freedom and human rights or whatever. But now they're like just nakedly claiming it's about the oil. And that's not even true, because you could have a deal with Maduro. And if you do go in and invade and overturn this regime, whether through kinetic action or some sort of CIA covert ops, which are probably already ongoing as we speak, if you do that, you're much more likely to end up with a failed state and an even larger, like more difficulties in striking any sort of a deal that's going to be beneficial for the world, let alone the American public. So the whole thing is like layers of insanity, honestly.
Right. And so then let me give again, I'll give you two sides of it. And this is a live issue. This is all playing out in the public. Okay, so let's put this up here on the screen. The ground is set for a potential invasion. Southcom, which is the area, the military command, which would be in charge of carrying out an invasion or decapitation, is restricting and limiting leave for its soldiers over the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays in preparation for possible land strikes in the next 10 days to 2 weeks. This was reported by Kelly Myers, who's the White House correspondent for News Nation. Now, at the same time, just yesterday, huge flights, show of strengths that have continued. Let's put this up there on the screen. 2 U.S. flights of B-52 Stratospheres departed from their Air Force base to the Caribbean Sea, basically a power and a force projection near Venezuela. They just fly along the coast and make it very clear, yeah, we can bomb you, you know, if we want to. This is right here. It's all coming. C3, let's go to the next part, please. And it'll just show you is that there were actually members of Southcom and others who resigned because they did not believe that the strikes on the drug boats were legal. And behind that, there was multiple general counsels and others that had to be fired and removed. And these are not, just so you got, this is one thing to explain here. These people who resigned or were removed, these are not liberals. These are not resistance, James Comey or whatever types. These are, they're actually, like, I very rarely say this, but like these are actual pros, and in many ways, they want to make it work. I mean, think about it. If you got firing or removal, people who are working for CIA, NSA, and others, they've greenlit some sketchy shit. Some of these are the people who, like, these are the organizations which greenlit the killing of American citizens, including, you know, so-called terrorists and others, in order to kill them with no due process. That's what they have done and have signed off on. Not exactly the squishiest folks that are out there. Drone strikes in Pakistan. So if they're coming out and being like, this is real dicey, you know, right here, that is kind of the biggest red flag, is instead of looking at it as like some deep state liberal, of looking at it as like, man, the people who have greenlit like drone strike murder on weddings and the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki with no due process, if even they come out and say, this is, you know, this is on the edge there, that actually is probably the one that made me actually wake up and be like, oh man, they must be taking things to a whole new level. If even these deep state guys, they don't care one iota about killing anybody. So for them to say something, that made me actually be like, oh God, this is not good. This is bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, this shit is insane. Like the reporting about the memo that's been used as legal justification makes it clear that they're just using the claims of Trump rather than any actual analysis or reality. And their claim is that effectively drug cartels, their real business is violence and terrorism. And the drug money is to finance the violence and terrorism rather than that, like the common and accurate understanding, which is that their core business is selling drugs and making money, and the violence is the result of this lawless and criminal behavior. And then there's the whole, you know, inventing this cartel that Maduro is supposedly the head of. I mean, it's just all utterly preposterous. And what they're claiming the power to do is literally murder anyone, anywhere, that they say has some connection to the drug trade. I mean, they're literally using, you know, this legal nonsense to try to justify whatever extrajudicial assassinations they want to commit. So even for these, you know, CIA ghoul lawyer types, they're like, yo, this is really far. This connects to, we'll talk later about the Mark Kelly stuff. And, you know, this is the subtext of the video the Democrats put out, like, hey, you shouldn't be obeying unlawful commands. this is the area. I mean, they're doing all kinds of illegal shit, but this is the one that is like the most brazen and the most glaring. And you can tell that from the fact they've had to fire a bunch of people just in order to coerce some sort of a memo with some sort of a justification for this insanity.
Yeah, I mean, I just, look, beyond the whole legal thing, it's just a bad idea. It's a horrible idea. Let's go and put C4 up here on the screen just to underscore all of this. The leaks are galore. These are all coming out of the State Department from the Rubio camp. U.S. to launch new phase of Venezuela operations, and they say the United States is poised to launch this new phase in the coming days. Reuters did not establish exact timing, but it would include CIA and potential military operations on Venezuelan soils, including demands that Maduro leave power. I do want to say, and this is important, is that at the same time, there is kind of a dual track that's happening. So a lot of what we're showing you right now is coming from the military and from the Secretary Rubio. But there's a recent report, and this confirms a little bit of what I've been hearing behind the scenes as well. Trump wants to talk directly to Venezuela, to Maduro. You know why? He doesn't trust that he's getting all the information from Marco Rubio and from the national security establishment. In a way, he can feel that he is himself getting played. And so before anything kicks off, he does want to speak directly with him, potentially on the phone or, some sort of summit. It's not exactly clear. But what he did say is that with this talk and all this, backed up by the whole, quote, gunboat diplomacy that's happening down there, that there is, at the very least, some potential here of an off-ramp. Who knows? Maduro himself, he's been quite a salesman recently. He's been trying actually to relay all of these things to Trump. He's like, I'll sell you the oil, give you what you want. This isn't really about socialism or whatever. You're being played by your, by your neocon Secretary of State. So the fact that Trump is willing to speak to him is actually one of the most positive developments. I'm not going to say it's going to solve everything, but there's been an ocean of propaganda that's been sent to Donald Trump's desk. Trump actually speaking to Maduro could potentially solve at least something. I'm going to hope. That's my last holdout for hope. That's all I'll say.
Saagar, it's interesting that you say the leaks to Reuters and other places about, hey, we're kicking off a new phase of operations in Venezuela, that you think that's coming from the Rubio camp. Because the other possibility would be it's coming from people who don't want to see this going forward and trying to raise red flags. What's your sense of that?
Yeah, you're not wrong. But part of the reason why, look, they believe in the political upside and the benefit of this. In some ways, they're not 100% wrong in that, is Venezuela really a huge story? Outside of this show and a few, is anyone on cable news even talking about Venezuela other than Fox News? Not really, right? So they pretty much think they can take care of this in the clear. They're telling them it'll be a cakewalk, no boots on the ground, just a couple strikes, no failed state. He's getting awash in propaganda. Look at Iran, sir, Midnight Hammer. You took him out and we came out. Now, we can talk about all the downstream implications and all of that if we want to, but like the nuts and bolts of it are, they think that the American public aren't paying attention and they don't care. Even though the vast majority of people, when they are polled, say that they oppose it, they're like, yeah, they'll get over it. We'll do something. It won't require a huge force. Now, you may have heard that story before in a little place called Libya, but they're like, well, this is different. We have our Maria Machado who's ready to go. So in a lot of ways, they're bragging about this. And also, a lot of this is pressure. Their ideal scenario is that Maduro just steps down out of nowhere and, basically hands power over to Maria Machado. They just don't. That's a total misunderstanding of, even if he did, let's say, step down, there's a whole apparatus, military and others, that depend on him and his regime staying in power. You think he's just going to give up power? Let's say if you really believe their own propaganda, that he's the head of this global or this Venezuelan large cartel. Do cartels just stop operating when El Chapo and these people go away? No. Okay. So even by their own logic, it doesn't make any damn sense. So it's all.
But Maduro will tell you, we have plenty of mineral and oil wealth. We don't need to sell drugs. Why would we do that?
That's the irony of it. He's always like, I've heard this from multiple people who've met him. He's like, guys, I don't sell drugs. I don't need to. It's one of those things where we call him corrupt, like, okay, it's like, yeah, but you're corrupt too. We say you stole the election. It's like, oh, well, but it's like the drug thing. He's like, where does this shit come from? He's like mystified at the idea that he's a drug dealer.
Yeah.
It's like there are rules.
It really does feel like, and it feels like this new messaging from Besson and Salazar and who knows who else, it's really aimed at Trump to try to convince him, like, oh, they can see now Trump's fixation is like, oh, affordability. I got to focus on affordability. So whereas before he was fixated on like fentanyl and the drug dealers and Tren de Aragua, now they're like, oh, okay, now he's moved on and he's focused on affordability. So we're going to make that pitch to him now and see if we can get him to. And, you know, and if this effort fails, they're not going to stop, right? Whatever his next interest is, they'll be like, hey, if you take out Maduro, it's going to help you build the ballroom or whatever it is that he's interested in. They're going to keep cycling through whatever rationales they possibly can, is what it feels like to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.